Tree and this is Stitchless TV. Now this is part 2 in the series of making nurses scrubs, and today we're going to make scrubs pants stroke trousers. Now the trousers that I'm making today are from the Sew Different free PDF download pattern or file that you can download and have printed at your printers. Now you can also use the For the Love of Scrubs Facebook group free PDF download as well, or probably any other scrubs trouser pattern. Now this one has 2 inseam pockets, 1 patch pocket at the back and a drawstring or elastic waist. So make sure you've got your pattern pieces. So I've got two of the front legs, 2 of the back legs, 4 pocket bags, pocket sacks. You should also have 1 of the patch pockets. Now I show you tips on how to sew the patch pockets in our video on how to make the scrubs nurses top, but I've already put mine on here. So to shorten the trousers, it's the same again. You don't do it at the hem. You do it like, I don't know, 1/3 of the way up the leg. Now I've lost on each leg loads. Wow, look, so that's about, I don't know, 5 inches. You want that in centimetres, don't you? Now when I stitched the pocket onto the back, I pressed a line to help me with the placement of where I wanted it to go, but you can use tailor's tacks. Now the different thing that I did on the trousers that I do wish I did on the top is I did 2 rows of stitching, because it occurred to me if you have 1 row of stitching close to the edge, it could easily split and they'll lose everything, whereas if you have 2 rows then that's a bit more secure, isn't it? Now do go and watch the part in the other video where I talk about sewing pockets, patch pockets. Now before you do anything else, I really recommend that you do this. So on the front of your pattern and on the back of your pattern, I want you to align that pocket sack with the side seam and decide how far down you want your pocket to go. Now I think I want mine to go about here. So I fold down my hem and I make sure it clears the hem that becomes the channel for the drawstring. And then when you're happy with it, I want you to put little notches on the side. So the notch for the top of it and the bottom of it. Now when you've done that, you need to also make sure, so I did it on my back of my leg. So I'm going to line up the front of my leg, the side seam, and make sure my notches also line up on the front. So look, see that? So that stops there and that stops there. Now on the Sew Different pattern, they have this kind of little step-in bit. Now I'd say when you cut it out, just ignore that, okay? You can do it if you want, but I think it's easier if you just ignore it and just treat it as a simple inseam pocket, and then you can always top stitch that little bit. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to stitch right sides together. We're going to stitch our pocket sacks to our trousers. Now, like with when we made our scrubs top, it's almost impossible to tell the difference in my fabric. So I need to mark what's going to be the wrong side. So I'm going to put a cross on the wrong side of all of my pieces, because it will just save confusion later on. So I think I'm going to do the same on the trousers as well. So I'm going to put a big cross on the wrong side of my fabric. Right, so as not to confuse you, we're just going to start working on our front. And this is to attach the pockets sack onto the side seam. So what I'm going to do is, look, you can see that that's my wrong side because I put a cross there. I'm going to open out my trousers. So these are just the fronts, okay? I'm going to open out my trousers. So this is the side seam here. And I'm going to open out my pocket sacks and place them right sides together. Very important, right sides together with our side seams. So do the same with that one. Now normally I would just go straight in and sew these things, but I'm just going to put a couple of pins in there. Now, the tip about sewing inseam pockets, which is what we're basically doing today, is we normally sew like 1mm smaller seam allowance than the overall seam allowance, okay, and it will become clear afterwards. If you're going to be overlocking your edges, you might want to look at doing them now, but I'm going to do them as I go along afterwards. We're going to sew a little bit smaller than 1 centimetre along there and stopping there, and then we'll do the same on the other one as well. You're going to start at the top and just go forwards and back. So just try and have in your mind that it needs to be just a little bit smaller, need a pin cushion, than the overall seam allowance. And then just backwards and forwards there at the end. So it will look like that when you've done it, but because it's the front, it actually ends up being the facing to the pocket. So when you do the other pocket, we do want our fabric to be on the left, so I'm turning it upside down now, but it's exactly the same process. Now I want you to do exactly the same thing as we've just done, but you're going to do it on the back leg pieces, and you'll line it up with the notches in exactly the same way. Hopefully you have stitched your pockets onto the 2 front pieces. Well, that's the back. You stitched your pockets onto the 2 back pieces and then press them out. No under-stitching for those for sure. So they're the backs, and you also stitched on your pockets to the fronts, but you can press them back like that if you like. Now remember, we're ignoring that little step-in bit because maybe later on we might top stitch it, I'm not sure. Now you may want to understitch along here, so if you do, you have to do that now, and I'll quickly show you that. So when you do understitching, you push all your seam allowance to the place where you are actually going to be top stitching, and then you top stitch on your top fabric and your seam allowance. You don't stitch here. It's not a top stitch that you see on the top of your fabric. It's something that keeps the facing back. So it's only the facing and the seam allowance that gets top stitched, like 1 or 2 millimeters away from the edge. So if you're going to do that only on your front pocket sacks, do that now. So understitching only happens on the front pockets, okay? The front facing pockets. I've pushed the seam allowance towards the pocket so that I can stitch onto all of it together. I'm in that awkward position now, so that's my excuse for not being straight. But basically, it's to hold the facing away. It's to hold the facing away. It's a bit wonky, like that. So that's your pocket front, and then your hand would go in there. Right, I want you to get one leg front and one leg back, each having its pocket sack sewn on. I want you to put your fabric right sides together and line up your side seams so that the pockets perfectly line up, almost more than the top of your trousers, but they should line up as well. And then line up the side seam going down. And make sure that everything is all lovely and flat. Now when you've done that, what you're going to do is this. This is your sewing journey. You're going to start there, and you're going to be the proper seam allowance, which is a little bit bigger than the seam allowance that we used for stitching on the pocket sack. You're going to come down here, and then when you're a seam allowance down, you're going to pivot the needle and then make your way around this pocket sack, coming all the way back up to here, and then cut across that line where you stitched on the sack, pivot the needle, and then run down the side of your trousers. Now, your life will be a lot easier when you're sewing your pocket sack if you give yourself just tiny little notches here and there. If you know that your pocket sack is lined up properly, just tiny little notches to show that your pocket sack is in the right position, and they'll be like your landmarks as you sew around. So if you make sure that they all line up as you go around this potentially tricky curved pocket, then you won't get like a sagging pocket opening. So I'm going to put some pins in there now, because I'm assuming you lot like pins. So can you see that? I mean, I've actually put the pins the wrong way round for me sewing, but still. So look at that. Can you see where my pins are? You're going to go around there. You're going to come step across to there, and then run it all the way down the trouser leg. Wow. Right, so what I meant when I said to put the pins the wrong way is because I always say you should have your fabric to your left, but my fabric isn't too thick. So you're going to start up there, and you're going to go backwards and forwards. Or forwards and back. And then it's the seam allowance coming down. Now what you want to be is to the right of where you stitched on your pocket, and then put your needle in, lift up the foot, and you're going to turn everything around, because you now need to start sewing down the pocket sack. So don't stretch anything, yeah? And if you did do those notches, make sure they line up. Now when you're sewing hundreds of scrubs, there is no way that you're going to be pinning like this. Do the notches. In fact, do notches for any seams that you do. But I've put the pins here for you to see. So you're going to start working your way down. Now I am sewing sideways, okay. Now coming around here is easy. Just go slowly. It's just driving around the bend, yeah? So no pulling at all, but I've got to feed this back in. You won't have to do that because you'll be sensible and have your fabric to the left. Right, we're coming up to the bit where we're going to have to do the step. I'm going to open everything out and make sure it's as flat as it can be. Seam allowance must be going towards the pocket sack, and that's the same for underneath as well. So I'm coming up there, I'm sort of curving around. I'm going to have to take the needle out now, pin. Curving around. I might put the needle in there, lift it up, turn so we can do like a step that comes across, and it goes just past that stitch line of when we sewed our pocket on. Turn everything around, get it all flat again, yeah? You want your work to be all nice and flat. And now we're going to start heading down the side seam of the trousers. So when you get to the end, go backwards and forwards and stop. So when it's done, it will look like this, but then look at the right side. So we've got a full tutorial on how to do an inseam pocket, but I think I've just shown you anyway. But if you want to see it again, you can watch this again, can't you? But look, that's what we end up with. So the scissors, they go in there. So we understitched it, so it should stay back, but I do think you should press it. Okay, now I've pushed all the pocket that way. Now I think what Laura probably wanted us to do from So Different, I think she probably wanted us to do like a top stitch there. So what you can do is you can turn it so you work from the facing side. I think it's better too. And then sew like that much, I don't know, what is that? Centimetre away from the edge and come down, and then stop just before that seam there. And then when you've done it, lay it flat, and then almost do like the equivalent to a bar tack, coming across the top of the pocket there and the top of the pocket there. I'll just quickly show you, but again it's in this awkward position. So I'm sort of going inside the pocket, that is the front, because we did the understitching. But if you do this, you don't need to do the understitching, do you? Anyway, right, so I'm folding everything back and I'm getting in so I can get as close as I can to the edge of the top of the pocket. And I'm just going to go forwards and back, decide how far away you're going to be and try and stay straight. So it's almost like a giant understitching, isn't it? So it will be important that you stop in the right place. So stop before that seam, yeah? You don't want to catch it. So that's that part. So look, you can see that. And then for the next bit, I'd say you have to do this. So for the next bit, push everything towards the front, and if you haven't got a bar tack stitch on your machine, it doesn't matter, you can just go backwards and forwards. So look, I've pushed everything, all seam allowances, going to the front and making sure I'm completely in line with the top of my stitch. I'm just going to go forwards to the stitch, carefully, backwards, forwards, and it's probably quite a good thing to do because it reinforces the top of the pocket. So do it at the bottom as well. My next one will be straighter because I won't be sewing in a strange position, but look, so that's quite good, isn't it? Now I press a lot when I sew. I'm not sure you'll be able to when you're doing hundreds of scrubs, but I think it helps a lot with the sewing process. Now what I would say about that is that you might want to overlock everything before you do that, because it's going to make it very difficult to get into my seams now. So all of that you need to do to the other front and back pieces of your leg. Now make sure you have them right sides together and double check all the time, otherwise you'll end up with two of the same legs. Let's have a look at what we've got so far. So this is the front of my leg, and I have stitched the facing down like I showed you, and then this is the other front, and we've stitched down the pocket there too. So we've got our pockets done. Now I've put a sneaky, can't remember what they're called now, but it's a patch pocket on the side of my trousers, and I'm not going to show you how to do that because I do talk about it in the Scrubs Nurses Top video. Now, to stitch up the inside seam on both of our trousers, all we do is we put our fabric, as usual, right sides together, and you match up the crotch, make it nice and straight, and you simply sew straight down there. And then you need to do the same to the other one as well. Now when we've done that, then there's this kind of little bit of sewing magic, which I always love. So you start right in at the crotch and you sew all the way down. So I'll start you off, but it's pretty easy. So go forwards and back at the beginning, centimetre seam allowance, no stretching at all. And then you just head all the way down to the hem. And you do that on the other side as well, with your fabric right sides together. So look, I'm still here. Right, so like I said, the next bit is one of those sewing magic things, and I love a bit of sewing magic. So I'll show you from up here. Move my sewing machine. So that's inside out, and that's the front, and then the back's at the back. Yes, we've done one leg. We've done two legs. So we've done two legs, and I've got my front and I've got my front. Yeah. What you have to do is you turn one of your legs, doesn't matter which one, the right way round. Okay, so I've got one of my legs the right way round and one of my legs the wrong way round. So what I do is I put the one that is the right way round inside the one that is the wrong way round. I'm getting confused. And then I match up the crotch, the actual crotch seam, and then I match up the front seam, okay, coming down to the crotch, and the back seam. I always put 2 notches for the back of the crotch and 1 for the front. So you match up your back crotch, you match up your front crotch, okay? Now I would say when you sew that, you want to sew it from the actual crotch coming up, and then sew from the crotch coming up the back. But I just want you to do this little thing. So the idea basically is that you have your fabric right sides together. You have your crotch meeting up, and we'll do those old pin things. You have the crotch meeting up. So we usually push our seams towards the back, don't we, when we sew? So we'll push them towards the back. So I've got my crotch meeting up. I'm going to match up the back seams. So I've done 2 notches there. And take it all the way up to the waist. So I've put a pin in there too. And then you need to do the same for the front, yeah? So you match up your front. I did a notch already that signified my front. I'm not sure if these pins are going to be the right way round, but there we go. Now what I wanted to say was, I think this is quite important, so let's make it flat. This is the front that comes up, and then afterwards the plan is that we fold down a small hem, isn't it? And then we put like a channel of elastic or drawstring. Apparently they prefer drawstring, okay? So if you are going to have drawstring, you need to have the drawstring to come out somewhere. We will be doing it with a buttonhole on either side, so you can push the drawstring out. But I really know that a lot of people are very scared of doing buttonholes, or they don't have that on their machine. So if you are going to fold it there, and if it's going to end up being that the width of it is, say, there, I would say what you should do is just leave a little hole that's big enough for you to thread your drawstring or ribbon or whatever it is that you're going to be using. So it doesn't need to be a big hole, does it? It just needs to be a little hole. So look, if I put these pins here, then what that means is then you'll probably sew go backs and forwards, sew up to the end, backs and forwards, and then come down, but leave that bit there as a little gap for threading your stuff through. Starting at the top in my very awkward position. So I'm going to come down. This is the front. This is the front. This is the front of our trousers, and we're sewing the crotch. Okay? And we've got our fabric right sides together. Now I'm going forwards and back. I'm a centimetre away from the edge. I'm going to take these two pins out, and I'm going to stop and leave a little hole. Okay? So I can probably lift my needle and just jump, I think. So I'm going to jump to the next needle, take those out. Oh, not needle, sorry, pins. Go back, oh, hello. Go backwards and forwards, so my pins are the wrong way, but hey. And I'm going to start driving down the crotch. Now, I think it'd be a good idea to reinforce, you know, around this crotch area, so you can go in and you can sew it again afterwards, just around the crotchy bit, yeah? Just to give it a bit of strength, particularly where it forms over your bottom. So now I'm coming up the back, yeah? So coming up the back, I don't need to leave any opening. So backwards and forwards. Now I'm going to reinforce that now, because otherwise I'll forget. So look, can you see I've left a little gap? So that's if you don't feel confident or you don't have a buttonhole foot on your machine. But so that I can get in to do the overlocking, I'm just going to cut in a little bit there so that I can grab all of this for the overlocking. So I'm going to overlock the crotch now. Don't worry if you don't have an overlocker, you can cut it with pinking shears or do zigzag on your machine. Right, I don't want to jump too many stages, but I have overlocked around the top as well. Now what I think is important is, so look, can you see? I'll get a nice nail. So can you see it's left that little hole for your threads to come out, but you do want to press your seams open or stitch it around there so it actually looks like a buttonhole. Go straight down, come across, go up, go across, just to emphasize where the hole is. Right, so crotch stitched up, at the back and at the front. At the front, we left that tiny little gap aligned with where we think the drawstrings would come out if you're doing that method. So before we do the buttonholes for the drawstrings, if you have a buttonhole foot, look at this. So both legs are in together. All you have to do is just pull it out, pull it the right way round. Look, they're nearly made. Look at that. They actually look like trousers. So now all that you have to do is, if you're going to be doing this method, okay, you just need to do the 2 little buttonholes. I'm going to show you a trick for doing that. 2 little buttonholes. We're going to put the drawstring or elastic or whatever it is that you're using in, hem that top, and then hem the bottoms, and you're completely done. Right, do you want to know how to create perfect buttonholes with a basic sewing machine, okay? And when you don't have stabilizer to go on the back, use just ordinary paper like printer paper. May not be fantastic for your needle, but it's great for stabilizing the fabric. Now, another brilliant tip is, come over here, on basic sewing machines, after each one of your buttonholes, you've got to turn it back, reset it, and go back again. And remember to have it on the buttonhole size. Right, here we go. I'm going to put it underneath the machine, and my camera person's going to be able to see in there, aren't you? I've pulled down the stopper lever and put my foot on the pedal. Look at this. So nothing has moved. It's lovely and flat with my really dry hand. Tear off the paper, snip your buttonhole, perfect for your drawstring. Right, so now I would recommend you pressing a line, or just pressing the hem for how it's going to be. Do it before you put your elastic in and sew it, so you can have, or drawstring, just so you can have a look at it. Now, if we had a bit more up here, I think it would be nicer to do, as we did on the hem of the top, a little, so you fold a little hem, and then you fold a big hem, and you top stitch it. But I'm trying to fold over as little as possible. So look, I've created this. So it's just a piece of elastic that is, let's see, I don't know, like 2/3, is it 2/3 of the width of the whole thing. But then to the end of it, I've attached a drawstring and a toggle, right? But you don't need to add the toggle part. And so my plan is to find the center of my elastic, stick a pin in there, and then I'm going to stitch that to the back, and then I'll stitch a channel for the hem and make sure I trap everything inside. Okay, so I'm going to take this toggle off just by squeezing it and releasing the drawstring, because I need to make sure, but I already know, that I can get my drawstring through the hole. Right, so I thread that one through there. I've got to thread the other one through the other side, the other buttonhole. So when I sew the hem, that all gets trapped inside, and it's my plan to sew onto the overlocked edge. Right, I've stitched that into place there. So I'm going to fold over this elastic put my needle in whilst I just arrange some of this stuff. Now I mustn't twist the elastic, and it was good to press the seam first because then I can see where the elastic has to go up to. So I've got a press line there. So I'm just going to sew using a slightly bigger straight stitch than I have. So I'm using a straight stitch. So I'm pushing the elastic over, making sure I've got a clearance, and then sort of sewing on the stitch, the overlock stitch line, pushing it over. So I'm just going to keep going like that all the way round. So even though when I have the drawstring it's narrower, I mustn't stitch on the elastic. So even though it's narrower, I'm going to stick to the same size of hem, and I'm going to make sure it stays out of the way, and line up, like very important, line up your centre front seam. So going back the other way, I needed to be careful that my elastic didn't twist. So just to be on the safe side, I've put a couple of pins in there, pushing over that drawstring and being very careful not to twist the hem too much. Now I've come to the elastic now, I've got to be really careful not to stitch on it, and then I'm going to go to the back. Now you don't need to do the toggle thing, you could just put them together and tie them in a knot there, just to be on the safe side. Right, now I want to do something because I just think it looks nicer. So I'm going to draw my elastic at the back. So I'm pulling it and pulling it, but I don't want to pull it too much actually. So when I think it's kind of pulled enough, I'll just put a little pin in the side seam. And then I'm going to do what I hope will be roughly about the same amount of gathers on the other side. So let's have a look. Okay, so I'm happy that that's about the same. So it should look like that. But remember, you don't have to have a toggle. You can just tie a ribbon. You don't even need elastic. But I recommend stitching whatever you're using at the back first and then having it in the channel. So the last thing that you need to do are the hems. And it's just hemmed in the same way as the top. A little hem pressed and then a bigger hem. And if you take this off your sewing machine, then you will just put your trousers inside out and sew it like a sleeve. Now I'm sewing from the top side, whoop, and feeling where my hem is, but you can sew from the other way round and have your trousers inside out. But as I pull my fabric, I can see where the hem is, so I can see where to sew, and then backwards and forwards, and do the other one as well. Wow, it feels really strange. So there we go. So this is the full nurses, or whoever needs it, scrubs outfit. So trousers. The trousers were okay. So I'm quite small. I cut a medium because I wanted it to be a bit bigger than me. My hips are about I can't remember what they are now. They're quite a lot. They're like 42. I think they're 42. So I can pinch 2 inches at the size. So I think my hips are like a size 12. So I cut out a medium. And I cut out a medium on the top, but you saw in the first film how I adjusted the length. I also adjusted a lot of the length on the trousers. So that's the front. That's my fancy pocket that I did. Oh, you're going to see my big bum now. I've got a really big bum. I normally hide my big bum. And yeah, I know I said before, and I think it's a bit naughty, but I think they make great pyjamas. So when this absolute, horrific, horrible nightmare is over, we're just going to all wear our scrubs as pyjamas. No, we're not. We're going to throw them in the bin or burn them, aren't we? Anyway, we'll make new scrubs in lovely silk as pyjamas. So I'll get my daughter to take some pictures of me so you can see me properly. But thank you so much for watching. Please share the video, because the money that I make from the video, I'm paying my local factory to make scrubs for our local nurses. And I'll show you, if you want, I'll show you how to do the V-neck band, although it looks a bit like a placket. Yeah, oh, it feels really weird. Oh, and I folded up these, they are actually a bit longer, look, so it's like that, but I folded it up. Ask any questions you want, I'll try and answer you, but go and look at For the Love of Scrubs Facebook group for loads and loads of information. And if you like this pattern, go to So Different. It's absolutely free. You can download the PDF, or you can download the file to send to your printers in whatever country to print onto paper. What else? One more thing. So Different have done the grown-on sleeve as a PDF download. But if you want me to show you how to do that, maybe I can show you when I do the banded V-neck. I can't remember what it's called now. Anyway, tell me below. See you again soon. Bye.